maybe I can tell coaches that don't get so focused on minor asymmetries rather than maybe define some sort of a specific movement pattern for the elite athletes and hopefully use that as reference so that they can maybe emulate that in varsity athletes and eventually, try to reach to that level.
Hi, Paul. It's my pleasure to have you on the Evidence Strong show. If you could briefly introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Alex. My name is Paul Arauz. I am from Ecuador. Currently, I am assistant professor in the Department of Orthopaedics at the Stony Brook University in New York, United States. My research interests are in biomechanical engineering, orthopedics, surgical navigation, robotics, and of course in biomechanics. So previously, as an assistant professor at University San Francisco de Quito in Ecuador, my research primarily centered on movement analysis, including projects investigating the biomechanics of weightlifting athletes. So that's why I came across about this project that I guess we are going to discuss today.
Right. We will look into the differences in biomechanics between elite and varsity level weightlifters, but I have to ask, why weightlifting? How did you get into this topic?
I think it was kind of a coincidence because while I was working at University San Francisco de Quito, we have elite athletes that were training there. Actually, they were preparing for the Olympic Games. I think those were 2022. And because of it, I thought that as an opportunity for us to develop this study. And I approached the athletes and their coaches and invite them to participate. Likewise, I invited varsity athletes to participate, and then we started the study. I guess the cohort for the study included 11 elite athletes and 12 varsity athletes. So in Ecuador weightlifting is not that popular as it might be in other countries. So I guess that number of athletes is kind of high for our standards there. So yeah, that's why we developed this study. Yeah, so the goal of the study was to better understand the technique, movement patterns, and muscle activation of elite athletes during the snatch, and not only snatch, also the clean and jerk. One of the hypotheses was that elite weightlifters will demonstrate more specific and consistent movement patterns and muscle activation profiles compared with varsity athletes. We were not sure about it because we haven't done that before. I have done more studies on movement analysis, but not with, weightlifters. So it was more like something that we wanted to learn, to investigate.
Let's talk a little bit about how you decided to run the study. What were the procedures and so on?
So for the study, we have to, prepare a meeting with the coaches and, training staff to see what will be the best approach for us to do this. So at the end, we decided that the best approach was to conduct this in one day because the athletes were busy. They were, approaching competition. So we didn't want to intrude in their preparation. For that, we went with 4 lifts that were spaced every 5 minutes. And the barbell load was 80% of each athletes, 1 repetition maximum. We wanted to assess the 3-dimensional kinematics of the athletes, kinetics, and lower body muscle activation.
All right. And you had 2 groups of athletes. You had, from memory, females and males in both groups.
I don't remember the numbers exactly, but I guess for elite, we have like 7 and 5. So 7 females, 5 males. And for varsity, I think it was kind of half and half. So those were kind of the numbers there. I think the information is in the paper, but I don't remember exactly right now. Yeah.
What have you ended up measuring and testing?
Okay, so let me see. As I said, we had a motion capture lab at the university. We have to move everything to the training venue. So we move all cameras and all, reflective markers, force plates, and surface electromyography sensors. And we, attach all these sensors to the athletes, which was kind of, I guess, it might be a bit strange for them to have all this, equipment. But we try to be the less invasive as to make this the less invasive as possible, so they will be comfortable and they will perform the task as natural as possible. So as I said, we conducted 4 lifts that were spaced about 5 minutes, and with all the equipment we collected synchronized information from the reflective markers, from the force plates. We also have markers on the barbell, collecting information also for the from the force plates. The data was collected included 3-dimensional model of the athlete, the complete whole body kinematics, which included 15 body segments. And we split these segments: 2 feet, 2 tibias, 2 femurs, 1 pelvis, 1 thorax, 2 hands, 2 forearms, and 2 humeri, as well as barbell. So that was the information for kinematics. And then with the ground reaction forces, we measured that with the force plates that were embedded in the floor. And also we attached the EMG sensors. And as I said, we were trying to target just lower body muscle activation. And the muscles that we analyzed were the vastus lateralis, gastrocnemius, biceps femoris, and gluteus. All data were collected from all the trials, and all the data that we collected we used for subsequent analysis. Specifically, I think what we found is that elite weightlifters demonstrated a significantly greater flexion than varsity athletes at the end of the second pull. I guess when the barbell was at the highest point. What we mean by this is that I guess elite athletes try to, because they have more flexibility, try to be more contracted, and I guess that somehow is providing more a bit more of impulse to while they are performing the activity. It was interesting also to see that elite weightlifters had a reduced gluteus maximus activation compared with the varsity group. Am I still trying to understand why this might happen? But I think is that because of experience, maybe elite athletes are not using all probably the potential that they might have in the gluteus maximus muscle, while maybe varsity, since they don't have that experience, they are trying probably to compensate with this kind of muscle during the lift.
Right.
One thing that I should mention here is we didn't publish on this yet, but I was trying to analyze the variability across repetitions for elite and for varsity athletes. And I started with the kinematics first, and I think that the variability is reduced for elite athletes compared to varsity. And I think it makes sense because they are professionals, so they know better, and I think they can control their movements more successfully. And I saw this across repetitions, and variability seems to be less. I haven't done any statistical tests yet, but at least from a few that I checked, it seems like they are more consistent, in their movement patterns. Yeah, I guess it might be something that I might see also in the muscle activation. But since the EMG data is very noisy, and even though we do some filtering and other mathematical tricks to do the analysis, I don't know if I would see something like what I saw for kinematics, because as I said, the repetition and the variability across motions was kind of with very low variability there. So it was interesting to see that too.
Yeah. Anything different between females and males?
Not really, because we have a very small sample size. So if we compare only between males and females in the elite group, we didn't find any significant differences.
Okay, good, Paul. Just bring it to the context. So it is a small sample in the context of any research in physical activity or sports science, but having 10 or 11 elite lifters, elite for the country, preparing for the Olympics. This is all you had in the country. This is
Exactly.
This is 100% of the sample the country has of elite weightlifters. So I think that's the trouble with research in Olympic weightlifting specifically. We have pockets of elite athletes in different countries, but every pocket is very, very small. So as soon as you start to research the athletes from such a small population, you encounter a problem with publishing the data. And as a result, we have very little data on elite athletes. So although the sample is in absolute terms is not huge, it is huge for our community and this level of athletes. So in terms of research in Olympic weightlifting, this study is very, very valuable because it had a sample of elite lifters from the whole country, one country. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So yeah, and we also have 2 more studies that we have published on. As I said, it was a lot of data that we collected, and it was kind of overwhelming to do the analysis for it because we were not clear on what we were going to see there. We had an idea, but nothing specific, As I said, probably the plan of analyzing the variability was a better plan, but we didn't go for it. But now we have the data, and we can maybe try to see if we can find something interesting there. So because we also collected the ground force, we were able to do the inverse kinematics to try to, estimate the moments and force that are exerted at joints where the athlete is performing the activity. So this is the second paper we published. It is also in the Journal of Biomechanics, and we call it Three-Dimensional Kinematics and Kinetics of the Snatch in Elite and Varsity Weightlifters. So briefly, I think what we found is that obviously elite weightlifters will have more forces and moments, and I guess that makes sense because they are professional athletes, and moments, forces, and power, particularly during the lead phases, reflect superior strength, control, and movement efficiency. So as you said, it is a large database. Everything is published, so it is something that can be analyzed, and I think it is I would say, good source of information for athletes and for coaches and people that love the sport, so they can check and maybe find something of important that might help them to improve or to study, to investigate.
Yes, we studies like that.
And the third one is we compare the kinetics, and the muscle activation only in elite athletes, but for the 2 leads. So for snatch and for the clean. No clean and jerk because we didn't have the setting for the clean and jerk at that time. But the idea was to see if there are differences, for instance, in the style and muscle activation within the same athlete when they were performing these lifts. We found that. So actually, the comparison indicates that snatch is a more explosive and requires more technique than the clean. The clean requires more force, but snatch is, at least from what we found, requires a more specific technique. So athletes need to learn this kind of lift. And we have the numbers there, so everything has been quantified, and I guess this is also important information that might help, coaches to understand how to prepare athletes for this kind of lifts.
Right, so snatch more technical, clean and jerk more requiring force generation.
Yes. No, I think this has been already described. I guess is by intuition, but what is important, I guess, from this study is that we were able to quantify that and to demonstrate with the numbers. And I showed that speed, technique, explosive reaction, flexibility is kind of important parameters for the snatch lift, while force is mostly force is the other parameter, is the main parameter that is kind of controlling the clean lift. Yeah.
What do you want coaches and athletes to take out of your study and our conversation today?
So I guess going back to the first study for the comparison of snatch between elite and varsity athletes, as I said, from our study, we understand that minor asymmetries might not be critical determinants for a successful snatch lift. However, variations in posture and muscle activation might be associated with differences in technical proficiency across levels of lifting experience, So what I'm trying to say is that we found differences between elite and varsity related to kinematic posture, muscle activation. And I think those differences are more relevant than having some sort of asymmetries in either elite or varsity. So I will ask, maybe I can tell coaches that don't get so focused on minor asymmetries, rather than maybe define some sort of a specific movement pattern for the elite athletes, and hopefully use that as reference so that they can maybe emulate that in varsity athletes and eventually, try to reach to that level.
So do you think there is a perfect technique for elite lifter?
I would say yes. From what I have seen, yes. I didn't do any comparison across because I have 5 females and 5 males, and I think 6 males for elite. And as you said, did I find any differences between male and females? I didn't. I didn't find any significant differences. But I guess if I maybe had more athletes, who knows? I might find some specific differences in movement patterns, let's say, for elite weightlifters. So from that, I would say yes. So I might focus some in the ones that are, successful, like with winning medals and stuff. So those might be used as reference, and hopefully those are the ones that might help for training the other ones to reach to that level. So yeah, my answer is yes.
Excellent. Anything else you want to add?
I would say that regarding the comparison between snatch and clean, I think I agree with you. There might be some athletes that are better equipped for the snatch rather than from the clean and jerk, and the other way around. So I think as the sport it is now, the best approach, I guess, for winning medals is to try to potentiate in what they are the best, and hopefully try to improve in the other one, but not as much as, to push too much, because that might cause injuries and might generate problems. Rather than, let's say, if one athlete is very good at snatch, then try to potentiate on that one and push on that one, because that one is going to be is going to provide hopefully better results. My opinion, but yeah.
I think the German weightlifting league, you have an option to swap the athletes in the league competitions. So there are some athletes who do only snatching, for example, because that gives them the best points combination in the team. So that could be.
Coach, I'm not a coach, so I'm not an expert, but I'm trying to provide my input from what I saw from the experiment that we did and from the numbers that we saw. But of course, techniques and everything, I guess coaches are better prepared than to maybe provide an opinion in that aspect. But yeah.
No, I appreciate you speculating, because you know the data very well. So, and coaches know their athletes very well. But coach 10 or 20 athletes, or sometimes even less, they know very, very well. But the researchers have the big number sets. They have the whole country's elite lifters. So they can speak from the general number informed model or approach. This is seeing the data, and then the coach can be, okay, how this applies to my lifters in particular. So I think this conversation is very important for the growth of the sport and so on. Coaches can use researchers, and researchers can use coaches to make the sport better for the athletes.
Yeah, I guess that is the direction that this has to take eventually, to get to help athletes and to help coaches.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome, Paul. Thank you so much. I have
welcome.
2 short questions to finish. The first one is, what is your favorite lift?
I think it is snatch, because as I said, I think this lift requires a combination of skills, including, precise technique, power, explosive strength, and flexibility. Yeah. So I think this is the one that I prefer.
Awesome. And the last question is, where people can find you online if they want to ask a question, find your research, where should they go?
I'm not that very active on social media, but people can learn more about my research and the research our group has done in the past through my Google Scholar research, ResearchGate, and LinkedIn profiles. So I'm happy to answer any questions that they reach out to me to these profiles.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paul. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome.